Well, good morning. I'm Jeff Coleman.
And I'm Debra Pinkerton. Welcome to Morning Light.
Well, get this. A majority of Americans believe their religious beliefs are at odds with mainstream culture. But is it really? Our Morning Light panel will go beyond the headlines to discuss when, where, and how Christian values should make us a little uncomfortable, a little different from the culture.
Good conversation.
Yeah.
But first, here's a preview of what's coming up later in the show. We continue our Faith Journey segment with two of our most popular panelists. John Wetzel served 3 terms as Pennsylvania's Secretary of Corrections. He grew up in the church, but was led astray. Learn how God led him back to his Christian faith. And Cynthia Lyons grew up going to church too, but it was just a habit. She knew she needed a change, and that happened once she had children. Both John and Cynthia share how appearing right here on Morning Light has helped grow their relationship with the Lord.
These two people, these two guests we hear from all the time from viewers that they really help them understand issues, and their faith journey is not something they always talk about, but
That's
it'll be exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, is the influence of religion in America increasing or decreasing? According to a new Pew Research poll, most Americans, 68% of you, think it's losing ground. But if you look beyond the big headline in this year's survey, there's a fascinating new indicator. While it's still a minority, the number of Americans who think religion's influence is inching up. In other words, religious people, not necessarily Christians, but religious people are increasingly viewed as having power in the culture. That's an interesting take.
It is very interesting when you think of power and Christianity.
Yeah.
But this latest poll on religion in America reveals something else. A growing number of Americans say faith puts them at odds with the world around them. 58% say there's a great deal or at least some conflict between personal religious beliefs and the mainstream culture. Now, that's up 16 points since 2020. So while religion may have some influence, that power has some limits.
This is very interesting because that number is a significant leap in a very short period of time. So where exactly are those dividing fault lines, putting faith on one side and culture on the other? Where are the differences most obvious? Is it in politics or academia or the media? Where should Christians legitimately look different, sound different, act different, or feel a little uncomfortable from the world around them? It's a line Christians have been debating for hundreds of years. When, where, and how should Christians stand against the culture? And the Morning Light panel today will solve it all. Robert William, Michelle Keadle-Taylor, and Tannon Herman with us this morning. I spent a few years, as you know, in the political world, and I think there was a promise that if there were just enough Christians that got elected to public office, that everything would change. And what you do see now is there are, in many legislatures, a majority of the people identify as Christians. But it doesn't feel so Christ-like, politics today. Tannon, what is the question we're asking here about what power Christians should want and what power we should probably pass by and not seek, because seductions of power are so strong?
Yeah, I mean, first thing, I think it's important you got to root yourself in the truth of the word. Jesus says, all authority has been given to me, and I freely share it with you. So if we're seeking to have something that we don't have, and we think political influence is that power, I think we're just missing it completely. Yeah. You know, that's the authority that we've been given that has been graciously bestowed upon us. You know, God might put you into a political position, but it's not something that you have to seek to validate or to affirm the authority that you have.
That's a radical idea.
It is radical, and especially in the day and time that we live in right now,
Yeah.
which I think, you know, to the research that we've been discussing this morning, is I think why people are associating an influence of religion on culture as a negative thing.
Right.
They are seeing, I would say this, a very clear picture of when it's distorted, when it's not really the gospel, and where it's not aligned with really what Jesus said. And I think that it's certainly not a thing that we should run away from. But I think there's a huge difference between self-promotion and ambition to gain some sort of power versus like, this is something I really feel the Lord has created me to do and to become.
I wish you had written the book on ambition before I went into politics. Tell me a little bit, Michelle, about this notion of what happens when a Christian makes power the pursuit and not Jesus, meaning makes the position the object, or if I was only CEO, if I was only president, if I was only the governor of the Commonwealth, I could change everything. But something happens, doesn't it, in the pursuit of that power that changes us.
I think the biggest thing with that, the potential downfall in that is that you're so busy seeking that power and that position, and you might have started off with the right idea, like I want to make a big difference.
You always
but
do,
somewhere along the road, if that position becomes your focus, then you're losing sight of the fruit of the Spirit, potentially. You're losing sight of being able to live Christ-like in this world, because you're pursuing almost what becomes an idol for you. So there's a possibility of shifting your desires from what God intended them to be over to, as long as I can get here, then I feel validated. And you're putting your value and worth in that power and position, when God's calling us to walk among culture as Jesus did. And Jesus, he bridged that gap beautifully. Right? A lot of the people who got angry with him weren't necessarily the unbelievers.
Right.
Because he was showing love, grace, patience, kindness.
He could move in different circles.
Absolutely.
Without losing who he was in that. But
That's right.
humans don't have that ability often. Robert, you've been a student of the political process. You have watched people around you. Even we were talking earlier about a classmate of yours who rose to the top of a nation as vice president in an African country. What does the pursuit of power do to people, specifically Christians, who have a very different mandate, right, as ambassadors for Christ?
Yeah, power can go to your head real fast. And when that happens, anything goes, at that point. So it's a question of who's on the throne, even in your pursuit of political ambition or office. Is Christ on the throne? Who's guiding you? Do you spend time in prayer? I mean, it's nice to talk about, let's pray for our leaders and all that, but do you actually spend time praying as a candidate and seeking God's will and God's face? So
I think candidates are always praying for votes and for blessings and for money.
For sure.
But what you're saying is very different, which is you're saying seek God and then allow him to order your steps.
That's right. That's right. You nailed it, exactly what I was trying to say. Because I feel as a Christian, again, if you're seeking higher office or public office, there's going to be that element of who's my partner on this journey, you see. It's not that you're trying to impose your faith on the voters. No, I mean, the voters may come from all kinds of religions. But it's what's your guiding, where's your source of your thoughts, your strategies, and just in terms of how you can serve the people. At the end of the day, public office is serving the people. And if you lose sight of that, and I think, as Misha said, if you start focusing on yourself, you can go astray real quick.
Let me shift quickly to another area of this poll, which is that there is a discomfort, it looks like, with people of faith, Christians in particular, and the culture. They're saying, the culture is asking me to do these things. My faith is asking me to do these things. It feels like we are going to come to an impasse soon on this. Where are the areas where a Christian should draw the line and say, I love my neighbor, I care for them, I'm open, I'm hospitable, but there's a place where I have to draw the line and say, I can't go there with you because my faith constrains me and constrains my behavior, and I have to take a stand here.
Yeah. I mean, what I will say this is, I'm encouraged actually that we are having a more clear contrast between American culture and Christianity. To me, that's the message of our faith, is it is inherently countercultural no matter where you live or where you grow up. That's why we needed a Messiah to come and point the way and say, there is a better way, and it's me. So I'll say I'm encouraged by that.
It's not you, it's the Messiah.
Yeah, not me. Yeah, sorry. Point my fingers. But so I'll say this, is I think that in Christianity, inherently where we conflict with American culture is, number one, self-denial. Like, our faith says, I'm not first, but the American dream is me, my future, my plan, my dream, my goal, my ambition, my vision. And that is radically opposed to our faith. I think the next big area is sacrificial love. Like, again, in America, it's very much about how much can I accumulate to myself.
And protect it.
And, versus the radical message of Christ is live simply and give generously. Like, try to do what you can to love everybody. I mean, I think about true religion, care for the orphan and the widow. You ask most believers in America, actively, directly, can you think of one orphan or one widow that you're impacting with your life? Most of them would go, Probably not.
Wow.
You know, and there are those divides, especially in activity with the poor. I mean, that's my whole ministry, what my wife and I do. I'm always shocked that we have learned to adopt a version of American Christianity.
Right.
And that's not, we're not talking prosperity gospel and all those other
Yeah.
tangents, but a version of it that dilutes what I would say is where we should be radically opposed to the American culture piece and how it fleshes out in the way that we live our life.
I know some people out there saying, well, it depends on what the definition of orphan is, right?
Sure.
But tell me, where do you draw the lines here? Where's the line for you? Take about a minute here.
I feel like for me, we all have the Holy Spirit in us. And if we are spending time truly with Jesus and we're communing with him, he's abiding in us, then he's going to give us checks for every situation. Obviously, we have the Bible, we have things that he's given us as guidelines, not to spoil our fun, but to keep us in a place where we're safe, right? He says everything is permissible, but not everything's beneficial.
Right.
So the thing for me is walking in love and humility and walking before him. So if we're going into an area and we're trying to, yes, the tenets of our faith start rubbing up against culture, which is going a totally different direction. The way I feel like he wants us to approach it is as Jesus did. He showed love in that situation, and that's the bridge that then carries your ability to speak into that situation. Because remember, I think the thing that makes Christianity different, or should, is what we're carrying inside.
Yeah.
And so when we get pressed into a situation and others are angry, remembering that what's going on here, they're believing something that might be different, but how are we reacting? Are we reacting in anger? Are we trying to shove things down their throat? Or are we showing love?
The reaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Plenty of opportunities to react or not react.
Absolutely.
Got about 30 seconds here. Hey, this is, you're of Indian heritage, Diwali Day. A lot of people in central Pennsylvania celebrating that. I mean, one of the things that we talk about is hospitality and reaching out to neighbors. Is this a good opportunity to reach out to, I mean, this is generally a Hindu holiday, some secular Indians, but how do we bridge that gap to be able to go across the street while the fireworks are going off and the party's happening and introduce them to the relationship you have with Christ?
Yeah, I think friendship is critical. You know, I mean, in India, Hindus will come to your house to Christian to your home and wish you Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas, and share sweets and
Yes.
Things like that. So if you're going to carry that culture here, you know, the same applies here. You know, there's nothing wrong in wishing your neighbor who's celebrating Diwali a happy Diwali. You know,
a good opening.
Yeah, a good,
to it.
definitely
And maybe
a good
bring
opening.
some food.
Right,
A
likewise.
cake, some sweets.
Yeah, something
Good.
You know, along helps the cause.
Friends, this was very helpful. Thank you very, very much. Well, thanks to our panel for joining us today. Coming up on Morning Light, John Wetzel is a regular panelist here on Morning Light. Well, John grew up in the church, became something of a prodigal. You'll learn how God led him back to faith. Up next, you're watching Morning Light right here on Lighthouse TV.
Welcome back. John Wetzel is the former Pennsylvania Secretary of Corrections. He was adopted and grew up in Lebanon County. Earlier, I spoke with John. He explains how an encounter with his birth mother helped him realize the need for God in his life. John, thanks for being with us. You have been on the panel a number of times. Share your faith journey with us.
Yeah, well, I think your viewers saw it pretty much. I mean, I grew up Lutheran. You know, I was adopted, and I grew up in Myerstown. So I like to say I was Pennsylvania Dutch. I grew up Pennsylvania Dutch in a Lutheran church, like a good Pennsylvania Dutch young man. In 2004, I converted to Orthodoxy. I'm very active in my church in Chambersburg, St. Mary Orthodox Church, throughout my career. To be honest, in looking back, about halfway through my time as Secretary of Corrections, you know, I kind of fell away from the church and attended less. And I think, again, looking back through someone who's been on a journey, you know, really lost my humility and lost my connection to God and understanding that having God in the center of my life just kind of slipped away. And so I retired in 21, hadn't been going to church or anything. And then ended up getting married at the end of 2023 to my wife, Phoebe. And shortly thereafter, my life just got really destabilized. I came in contact with my birth mother and in a really hurtful, kind of damaging way, and really destabilized my life, and I was confronted with really my being an orphan, and having to acknowledge it. And fortunately, again, I in a loving relationship, and my wife literally drug me back to church, and she was not Orthodox, but drug me back to the church that I was a member of, and through really just throwing myself into church alone, just going to church, and initially just going through the motions, quite frankly, just showing up. That's as much as I was doing, and then just praying. Just got to a point where I realized I couldn't do anything. It wasn't, and I could tell you times in the middle of the night where I just said, I'm done, I give up, whatever you want me to do. Wow. And so, like I said, I think that if you look back to the first show to now, I feel like a different human being, but it was not a fun path. It was quite a journey, literally.
Wow, certainly a journey. How do you find God working through your life?
Well, again, I mean, I can't tell you how many walks in the woods and just understanding that all this other stuff's just a distraction. And when you start every day, like, I just know that I can't have distance from God. And first of all, I think even in my previous faith journey, it wasn't a personal journey. It was like the angry God you didn't want to make mad, not the loving God who's like the prodigal father who says it's okay whatever you did. And so I made that switch, and it becomes easier. And then you pray a lot, meditate, kind of some of the practices of the ancient church, where you're spending time by yourself and thinking about it. And then the other big pivot for me is just spending all my time trying to focus on my neighbors and not focus on my own needs. It's just what I had to do to survive, and turns out it kind of works for me. It's kind of how I was wired, and I think from the beginning.
It's something where you really have to incorporate Jesus into every step of your walk.
Yeah, and you start there. You just start with prayer. It's a relief to me now, where I've always put so much pressure on myself to perform. And it's just a relief when you really get to a point. I mean, I think I read something. I read two things that really changed it. One, and I don't remember, it was one of the ancient church fathers, but they said that how it works is just when you bow your head, God will bow the whole universe to meet you. And I really feel like that was my experience. That when I really just decided to condescend and have some humility, that my lack of humility was interfering. And then once that went away, and building a real relationship with our Lord, who that's what He's there for, really put me in a place where I can live how we're supposed to live, I think.
And so what was the second reading or lesson?
Yeah, it was on how I was praying. It was this lesson that just said, yeah, the secret to praying is that you have to believe what you say. And once I started really concentrating on that, it was hard. It was hard to have real faith. I guess that's really what faith is, believing it, And so the combination of those two things really helps me manage today, which is what I focus on. I get up and I focus on today, and I start with our Lord and then go from there.
And that's a wonderful thing to do. And really, it's about faith, knowing that God is in control. John, thanks so much for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you.
Coming up next on Morning Light, Cynthia Lyons went to church, attended camp, and had great friends in her youth group. But it was just a habit. She shares what led to a faith change. Stay with us. We are back in 1 minute. Cynthia Lyons has appeared the most as a panelist on Morning Light. She is an educator and community leader. While Cynthia grew up in the church, attending was more of a habit than a relationship. She shares how the birth of her children helped her grow in her faith. Cynthia, thanks for being with us. Share your faith journey with us.
Sure. I always went to church when I was growing up. I think it was more of what we did. So we were always, dressed and coiffed, because that's the way people went to church years ago. So we did that. I think it was really only after I had children that my walk began to change. My investigation into the Bible, what I needed to know, I think, became more important to me, and really has continued ever since. So,
What do you think that transition was?
well, I think it transitioned for me more of something that became really, really important to me rather than it just needed to be done. So again, when I was growing up and through my teenage years, it was just what we did. I can't honestly say that I learned everything I needed to know when I was growing up. I had a lot of fun at church. We had great youth group. I went to church camp. I had great friends. But it was really when it became really important to me and to my heart and to my family that it became really a gift that I wanted to make sure that I was raising my children in an environment where they could grow.
And it is something, since your parents had you go to church, and it was sort of just something that you did every Sunday, and like you mentioned, going to church camp, it's something that you wanted to pass on to your children too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we had left the Presbyterian church at that particular point, and were attending another church. And they did. They grew up in a Tots to Twos program, and we went to Sunday school with them, and then we went to church and to a contemporary service. And they did experience more growth, more learning, more understanding, I think, as they were growing up. Because I'm not sure, I hate to use the word prim and proper, but I think it became more of a relaxed atmosphere for our family, which I think is really important, to have a forum where you want to grow in your faith. Yeah.
And how have you seen your faith continue to grow?
Wow, yeah. Well, I mean, I've been very, very blessed with you and Jeff in the last year, and this has really helped. The backstory is my father's family were pastors, and so I watched that also growing up, in the good and the bad, I think, of pastoring a church. So I really think probably in the last 10 years or so, as my children have grown, gone on to college and left, our home, it gives me a lot more of an opportunity, I think, to be able to have some more time. And that's probably more of an excuse than it needs to be, because I think we always need to wake up and the first thing we do is read a scripture. It's very easy to say and sometimes easily forgotten. So I really would say it's been 20 years, and it's really been more 10 years of some, I would say Bible studying. And I have not read cover to cover, but I've enjoyed what I've done in the research that I've done, and certainly the Morning Light Show has been a huge help in that.
That's so wonderful to hear. How do you see your faith making a difference in your life?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I'm hoping it's really making a difference in my life, how I can shine the light to others. I work in the high school environment. I work at a community pool, and so my job is to make sure that I am working on shining the light. And so I work on that struggle between what is okay to say in that environment, and then hold back when I need to, which is sometimes a hard lesson to learn, I think. But I am, I think, hopefully making a positive impact, not only on obviously my immediate family when that needs to happen, but the community around me, which I think is really important, and really the teenagers, which I think is kind of really my passion right now.
Cynthia, I'm sure you're having a very positive impact on all the people that you encounter every day.
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you.
Our Faith Journey series ends next week with Pastor David Smith, from a good sinner to a good Christian. Pastor David grew up in a Christian home, but said he was not saved. He got into trouble and ended up behind bars. When his parents would not bail him out, God intervened. Hear how a jail cell radically changed his life. Plus, we will share details of Pastor David's new show right here on Lighthouse TV. Stay with us. We're back right after the break. Welcome back. Coming up tomorrow on Morning Light, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Learn how a Pennsylvania faith-based ministry provides hope, support, and community for women fighting the disease. Plus, a breast cancer survivor will share how her faith in God helped her through this difficult journey. And that's a look at what's coming up tomorrow on Morning Light. Now, Jeff, your closing thoughts.
Thank you, Debra. Well, in cities across America, the park bench is disappearing. You heard that right. Cities are removing them because they argue benches are being used as beds for homeless people. But it's good to remember that America's cities didn't always have benches or parks or tree-lined riverfronts. In the late 1800s, benches were a central strategy to beautify dirty, congested American cities, a way to lift up the poor, inspiring alternatives to vice and violence. It was as old as the mandate given to Adam and Eve. You remember them in the Garden of Eden? The City Beautiful movement in the 1800s, right here in Harrisburg, along with organizations like the YMCA, were moral crusades. For many, it was a way their Christian faith could bring dignity and grace to rough streets. So while benches aren't beds and city parks aren't the greatest substitute for a home, we should probably think twice about eliminating the bench. We were created for work and rest, and the world around us has so very few places to rest. The city park, a wonderful place to share friendship, get to know your neighbors, and of course, share the gospel. For Debra and the entire Morning Light team, I'm Jeff Coleman. Thanks for watching today. Now go check on your neighbors, and we'll look for you right back here tomorrow morning.